covering Missouri and Illinois politics. Every week, we will hear from the leading newsmakers and political power players in local, state, and federal governments with live, long-form interviews. Our guest will join us on the record. We will bring you expert analysis from political experts like political science professor Anita Manion, who will provide insights for the record. And from time to time, we may have to set the record straight with a fact check or two. But our promise to you, our viewers, is to focus on facts, hold politicians to account for their words and actions, and to let the record speak for itself. We launched this new program with less than 7 weeks to go before Americans cast their ballots in the 2022 midterm election. Control of the Senate could very well come down to Missouri, where Democrat Trudy Busch Valentine hopes to flip a red seat blue. Polls show her trailing Attorney General Eric Schmitt, a more seasoned politician who has criticized her for her privileged upbringing. Her last name, Bush, a household name in America. Now she's working to make a name for herself. She's a widow who remarried, a mother who buried a son to a drug overdose, and a woman who worked to become a nurse. We recently sat down with the first-time candidate as she took an RV on the campaign trail across Missouri. Trudy Busch Valentine is on the record.
It's good to be with you, Mark.
I saw the slogan on the RV here, and the slogan of this campaign is "Nobody's senator but yours." What does that mean?
That means I'm not doing this for ego or power or for money. I'm not in the pockets of big companies. I'm not getting money from them. I'm doing this to serve Missouri and to serve the United States.
And are you suggesting that that's a contrast with Eric Schmitt, that by extension he is in someone's pocket?
Yes, you can definitely say that.
He has, I don't know how closely you watch his Twitter page.
I'm not on Twitter.
You're not on Twitter. Your team is on Twitter campaigning for you. There's this contrast that's interesting. He says that you're trying to use wealth to buy a seat in the Senate. You're saying you cannot be bought. What's the difference?
Well, what I used in the primary was my money to seed that campaign. But look, no matter how much money I put into this or anybody else puts into this, including into Eric Schmitt's campaign, which has millions and millions of dollars in it right now, the vote is what counts. People need to get out and vote. That's what makes us a democracy. That's what counts in being elected and having a free and fair election.
He's wanting to make a lot of the race and the contrast about wealth. He refers to you as a wealthy heiress or an out-of-touch elitist. Those are his words. And he talks about that he's from Bridgeton, not from billions. Mm-hmm. How do you rival that rhetoric?
You know, Eric Schmitt doesn't know me at all. I became a nurse a long time ago because I care about others, and all through my life I've tried to give back and help others. It doesn't mean because I have money that I am any less a human being. I open my eyes, my heart, and my mind to what is going on with other people. I'm interested in other people. I care about what's going on in their lives. And Eric Schmitt came from a family that worked at Anheuser-Busch. And my father, alongside union workers at Anheuser-Busch, made the biggest brewery in the world. And union laborers were paid great wages, they had great benefits, they had vacations, and they can live very well in retirement.
It's interesting. He talks about when he won his primary, he gave a speech, Eric Schmitt did, and he said he didn't want to go to the Senate to join these swanky soirees and go to the fancy galas and the dinners. I think he does touch on a nerve that a lot of Americans fear, that the U.S. Senate is no longer the world's most deliberative body, but that it has been sort of ground to a halt to become more of a swanky social club for the rich and powerful, who then go to D.C. and basically beg for political contributions and in return do little to nothing for it. So how would you change the system? Are you going to D.C. to be a change agent?
I want to be the change that people want to see, and I'm not going to D.C. to become a swanky political person. I am going to D.C. to serve the people of Missouri. That's what politicians should be doing. They should not be worried about what they get from other companies, from other people. They should not be in the pockets of people. The only people that they should answer to are the voters that elected them in and the people of their state and their country.
Campaigns are always interesting. They're kind of like a big, cumbersome job interview. Part of it is to illuminate and learn more about the candidate and their personal character. The other part is to learn how they would use those skills about themselves to further a cause. You mentioned during your speech in Hannibal that you would not trade stocks in Congress. Would you ban members of Congress from trading stocks?
I don't think people in Congress should trade stocks while they're in Congress. They know too much about what's going on. My stocks will be in a blind trust. I will not look at them at any time while I'm in office.
But would you vote for an outright ban?
I would have to look into that more. I think putting stocks in a blind trust is okay too.
Very interesting. During the primary, you said something that raised a lot of interest on the campaign trail. You were in a television interview. You volunteered the quote that critical race theory, quote, tries to take away from the history of our country. What did you mean by that?
I meant by that we need to teach the history of the United States of America. We need to teach the good and the bad. We have to learn from history so we don't repeat it.
I think the Attorney General has seized on some of the curriculum at the grade school and high school levels and has been critical of it. It sounded to some people like you agreed with him.
No, I don't agree with him because he's making it an issue that he doesn't want certain things to be taught. We need to teach history as history happened, and that includes the good and the bad.
One of the voters that met with you in St. Charles at the first stop on your RV tour was wearing a pin that said "Moms Demand Action." And I heard a few voters ask you what you would do about gun violence. Well, what would you do?
I think we have to stop the gun violence that is going on in our state and all through our country. And the massive shootings that are killing our kids and bringing so much heartache to the families that are left behind have to end. We need to get military assault rifles out of the hands of 18, 19, and 20-year-old guys.
So if you can't buy a beer, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun.
Absolutely.
But you know what gun owners are going to say? If I'm 18, I can enlist in the military. The U.S. government can train me and put a gun in my hand, and I can go over and give my life, but I can't carry a gun when I'm back home.
Look, I'm for the Second Amendment. I come from a family of hunters. My children hunt. They have been taught gun safety courses. When they hunted, they could hunt, that's fine. When the guns came back in the house, they were locked in a closet. We need gun safety, and we need to be careful about who we're selling guns to.
Would you consider an exception for members of the military who were trained to use weapons to be allowed under 18, or under 21 rather, from 18 to 21 to have a weapon? Well, you said assault weapon. How do you define assault weapon?
I define assault weapon as a machine that can kill many people in a very, very short time.
So that's an interesting definition. The courts have looked at this. A lot of gun advocates will argue a regular rifle could be modified post-market to carry out very much the same style of rapid fire that you're describing.
Well, we're seeing military assault rifles in these killings that have killed so many of our children and so many people throughout this state and throughout this country.
Mm-hmm. You've campaigned a lot on pro-choice positions to say that you would support expanding abortion. Would you vote to codify Roe versus Wade in the federal law?
I would, even if we had to end the filibuster to do that.
You have said that during the primary. I wonder the specifics, though, because as you know, Roe allows all abortion in the first trimester. It allows states to offer some regulation so long as they're in the mother's health interest in the second trimester, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, in the third trimester, Roe versus Wade says states can regulate abortion in that late term of the pregnancy. Does that mean if you vote for Roe versus Wade at federal law level that you would be voting to restrict some late-term abortions?
Look, what happened in our state is that Eric Schmidt came in with the biggest trigger laws going, and he don't even allow abortion for people who are raped or for people who become pregnant through incest. These right for women to choose have to be between a woman and her doctor, not any kind of government mandate and not through a legislator or anybody that's a politician.
But I want to try to pin down your position specifically, because you're saying people could hear two different things there. Roe versus Wade allows states to restrict third trimester, late-term abortions. You just said let the women decide. Is there room to compromise there? If you pass Roe versus Wade into federal law, Roe versus Wade viability standard would allow states to restrict third trimester, late-term abortions. Are you okay with that position?
I'm a nurse. I see and know that pregnancies can get very complicated. Those decisions still need to be between a woman and her doctor.
Even though the Roe standard says the states can decide third trimester, you would go farther than Roe.
I would say this choice is between a woman and her doctors. Pregnancies get complicated.
Do you want to see Joe Biden run for a second term?
That's up to Joe Biden. That's not up to me.
Well, he doesn't decide what you want. Do you want to see him run for a second term?
I am concentrating on my race for the Senate for Missouri, and that's why I'm on my way traveling around throughout rural Missouri. And we're going to go up north and we're going to head over to Platte County. And I'm enjoying doing this. I want to listen to the people. I want to listen to their issues and concerns.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Political science professor Anita Manion joins us now with a recap and analysis for the record. Since that interview, we should note Trudy Busch Valentine's campaign has clarified their position. She would support an outright ban on members of Congress trading stocks while they're in office. She was more comfortable in that initial reaction with a blind trust where she just couldn't look at it. How important of an issue do you think that is with voters? Is that something that really moves the base if there's that real or perceived conflict of interest? Do voters care?
I haven't seen it as anyone's top issue in the campaign, but I do think it's important more broadly as just faith in elections and faith in our elected officials and helping to eliminate some of these perceptions of corruption.
We should note, we have invited Attorney General Eric Schmitt to come on the record. But for now, the prospects of those two debating each other in person seems rather dim. Schmitt accepted the terms offered by Nexstar Media. Busch Valentine declined those terms eventually, saying in a statement that Schmitt, quote, only wants to communicate through frivolous and expensive lawsuits or in safe spaces owned by a conservative-leaning, out-of-touch corporate media giant. Those were her words. How do you grade her response there?
I feel like that last part of it sounds like it could have come from the Schmitt campaign too, right? Sort of, we've seen a lot of Republicans choosing not to debate and the RNC pulling out of the Presidential Debate Commission. And a lot of that has been the demonizing of the media in an unfair environment. And so it seems like Trudy Busch Valentine in some ways is taking a piece of their script. But, you know, that is part of the negotiation on debates. Is it a moderator and an outlet that both sides feel comfortable with? Overall, I'm disappointed that Schmitt didn't participate in the last debate and that maybe Busch Valentine isn't going to participate in the next one.
Schmitt did accept the Nexstar debate, then blasted her for refusing before she ever responded. Right. We saw that headline in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It said, quote, news director refutes Schmitt claim that Valentine refused to debate in that case. So who's winning this debate over dodging debates?
Well, I think that it's a narrative that has been happening in the Republican side, particularly since Donald Trump. So that sort of norm in participating in debates has dissipated on the Republican side, and those candidates haven't seemed to pay a price for it. But on the Democratic side, Trudy Busch Valentine might be held more accountable.
Anita Manion, thank you for joining us. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for now, but thank you for joining us for our first episode on The Record. Next week, we will have more Missouri and Illinois politics for you. But for now, we're off the record.